All right, let's dive right in. Today, in this explainer, we're looking at a pretty wild paradox. It's this fascinating contrast between our human desire to just get away from it all and the natural world's desperate need to do exactly the same thing. We'll explore how people will literally travel to the ends of the earth to escape each other, while, kind of ironically, we're simultaneously pushing the rest of the life on our planet into shrinking, tiny little corners of survival. So, I want you to imagine, just for a second, a life completely off the grid. I mean, totally stripped of the convenience of supermarkets, completely free from the noise of crowded cities, no concrete jungles anywhere in sight. Now, for some of us, that kind of profound silence sounds terrifying, right? But for others, it is the ultimate sanctuary. It really makes you wonder, exactly how much peace does that extreme level of remoteness actually bring? And what are the real trade-offs when you live a life that profoundly disconnected from modern civilization? Well, to answer that, we kind of have to look at the extreme limits of human endurance. Take Oymyakon, Russia, for example. This is a place where the coldest recorded temperature hit a bone-chilling minus 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That was back in February of 1933. I mean, it is the literal embodiment of harshness. Yet, incredibly, about 500 deeply resilient individuals actually call this remote Siberian town home. Moving on to Section 1, Extreme Human Isolation, Life at the Edges of the Earth. Let's take a quick globe-trotting tour of the most isolated corners of the world where people actually choose to live. It's honestly amazing to see just how adaptable we are and the absolute incredible lengths we'll go to just to get some peace and quiet. Like, if you want to visit Tristan da Cunha in the South Atlantic, you can't just hop on a quick weekend flight. No way. It's 1,750 miles from South Africa, and you're looking at a 6-day boat journey with only 9 scheduled trips a year. Or head over to the Pitcairn Islands, total population, just 50 people. Over on Easter Island, the 8,000 residents literally share their home with 887 ancient Moai statues. Up in Itokortomormiit, Greenland, the ground is frozen solid 3/4 of the year. But hey, the 363 locals still have a pub that opens one night a week. And back in freezing Oymyakon, planes can't even land in the winter, so folks will drive 8 hours just to reach an airport. And they survive on a diet heavy in ox, reindeer, and horse milk. Seriously, humans will endure some bizarre quirks for their isolated tranquility. Which brings us to Section 2, the Anthropocene pivot, when isolation becomes survival. Now here's the big pivot. While some humans actively seek out that extreme isolation for peace or privacy, other species on Earth, well, they're being forcefully pushed into it by us. We really have to acknowledge the sheer gravity of our global footprint here. We are now living in what scientists propose is a brand new geological epoch called the Anthropocene. Basically, human activities are now the absolute dominant driving force on ecosystems worldwide. Just look at the highlighted red zones on this map. A staggering 95% of Earth's land has some degree of human modification. 95%. The actual untouched natural wilderness is shrinking drastically, and it's completely rewriting the rules of survival for wildlife. So this brings us to a crucial concept called the shifted baseline, or niche truncation. And I gotta tell you, this completely blew my mind when I first read it. You know those super isolated remote areas where we see endangered animals living today? Well, those aren't necessarily their natural, preferred habitats. Often, they are literally just the only places we haven't destroyed yet. So we end up having this totally biased understanding of where animals actually want to live because historical, localized extinctions have basically truncated or cut short their natural environment. It's like judging a fish's favorite habitat by looking at a puddle just because we drained the lake. Okay. Section 3. Defining Anthropocene Refugia, Nature's Off-Grid Havens.
So how do we actually combat this incredible pressure on the natural world? Well, researchers have developed a core scientific solution to secure safe havens for biodiversity, and they call these havens Anthropocene refugia. If you look at the top rows of this model, it's pretty brilliant. It shows how scientists map an animal's natural distribution, and then they intersect that with the crushing weight of human-caused or anthropogenic pressures. Basically, by overlaying where an animal currently lives or realistically could live with a map of human threats, we can pinpoint the actual physical spaces left for their survival.
Let's break down the formal definition researchers use for this. They define Anthropocene refugia as areas that provide spatial and temporal protection from human activities and that will remain suitable for a given taxonomic unit in the long term. Okay, a lot of big words there. But what you really need to take away from this is that these are not just temporary hiding spots. They aren't just tiny leftover patches of woods. They are long-term, highly stable havens. They give sensitive species the physical room and the crucial time they need to persist, and eventually to expand and recover.
Moving right along to Section 4, Mapping Nature's Safe Havens, the methodology behind the protection.
So, we know what these refugia are conceptually, right? But how do scientists actually go out and map these critical survival zones in the real world? Well, the methodology is essentially a three-step time machine. First, they have to look back. They integrate deep time, prehistoric, and fossil data to fix that shifting baseline problem we talked about earlier, which helps them discover where an animal's natural range truly is. Second, they look at the present. They layer on the current human footprint, things like modern infrastructure and agriculture. And finally, they have to look to the future, projecting climate changes to ensure the area will actually remain a suitable habitat in the long run. Now, you might be wondering, how do you accurately measure that human pressure? Interestingly, seemingly mundane socioeconomic metrics become absolutely vital threat mapping tools here. Scientists look at things like projected population changes, rural population density, and infrastructure expansion. They even track global adaptation indices, like child malnutrition rates. Why? Because these specific socioeconomic vulnerabilities act as predictors. They tell us exactly where human expansion, land conversion, and the use of biological resources will inevitably intersect with and ultimately threaten wildlife habitats. So by combining that continuous spatial data with those specific human pressure indices, scientists can actually pinpoint the ultimate sweet spots for conservation. It's like a giant puzzle. They are searching for the precise geographical intersections where low human pressure perfectly aligns with high ecological suitability. It's a super complex mapping exercise, but the goal is simple. Find exactly where nature still has room to breathe. This brings us to a really crucial distinction: the difference between two specific types of refugia, realized and potential. Realized refugia are the spaces animals are desperately clinging to right now. These are areas we absolutely must actively maintain and protect from any further degradation. Potential refugia, on the other hand, are areas where the species isn't currently found, but where they historically lived and, crucially, could thrive again. Think of these potential areas as the blank canvas we need to restore for their future survival.
And finally, Section 5, our shared global future, ecosystem restoration in a dynamic world.
Let's tie these human and ecological storylines together. We are currently in what the UN has actually designated the decade of ecosystem restoration, because simply protecting what's left, it just isn't enough anymore. We have to rewild and restore. But here's the catch. Our world is highly dynamic. Relying on static maps from the past isn't going to cut it, because human populations are constantly growing and shifting, and our climate is rapidly changing. We have to constantly forecast shifting land use. We literally have to map not just where humans are right now, but where we're going to be in 20 or even 50 years so we can reserve that space for nature way ahead of time. And this quote right here,
pretty much summarizes the core takeaway of this entire explainer perfectly. Identifying Anthropocene refugia will improve biodiversity conservation and restoration by allowing better prediction of key areas for conservation and potential for re-expansions today and in the future. It's a total game changer. This framework takes conservation from a purely reactive posture, just putting a fence around whatever remnants are left, to a highly proactive, forward-looking strategy of targeted ecosystem restoration.
We started out today by looking at how humans will travel to the absolute most extreme, freezing, isolated corners of the globe just to find a little peace and quiet. But the reality is, the animal kingdom doesn't have that luxury. They are quite literally running out of space. So I want to leave you with this final thought. As our human populations continue to shift and expand globally, will we be proactive enough to leave enough remote corners of the Earth for the rest of life to survive alongside us? Ultimately, it's our shared responsibility to ensure that the answer to that question is yes.